Hi, welcome to week 2, semester 2 of my Master of Forestry grad school wrap-up. I realized that I didn't even show y'all the forest last week, so here it is in all of its incredible beauty. We got a bunch of snow last night, and we have more expected all week. I'm super stoked. I was up really late last night doing my statistics homework, so I may have to use my notes more than I want. But I realize I am learning so much. I am going to keep the information I share focused on its impact on forests, because what I want to study is the value of forests and what trees offer us alive more than they do dead. All right, so for bugs class, forest insects. The interesting things that I learned in terms of forests are, one, insects have a digestive system. It's more similar to ours. Their circulatory and respiratories are not. Their digestive system, they have a hind gut, and in terms of being efficient, just like they are efficient sources of protein, they are very efficient. They extract all the water out. So their excrement is completely dry. Frass is what it is called. In most mammals out in the woods, it is called scat, or if you want to call it poop, that's what it is too. But the thing that was interesting to me about that in terms of forests is, if you were to go walk around and find some really cool looking star-shaped blobs, you could say, oh look, a caterpillar had been here. So you can identify what has been out in the forest from the frass. They also have a lot of mutualisms in their guts, and that is one of the reasons that insects can eat just about anything in the world, including wood. Let's see. Oh, their reproduction system. So they're pretty fascinating with the way that they can reproduce. The females can fertilize one egg, or she can fertilize ever how many she wants. And she can do that. She can create new life asexually or through sexual means. She will go with the asexual if things are good and no change is needed, then she just reproduces asexually. If the conditions are not good and they need new genes, then she will seek out a sexual reproduction. So that is one of the ways that they are very efficient in their reproductive system. Another thing that is efficient with them is paediogenesis, which means that the juveniles can reproduce. So they are very rapid in their reproduction. In terms of climate change in forests, that is really important because things in many areas are getting warmer. Say in the past, insects were going to be able to reproduce from June to August. Well, now it is warmer and the growth season is May to September or October. So they have the ability to keep reproducing, and even if it's warm enough and the winter doesn't kill them out, they can go the whole time. And now you have this massive infestation of a species that used to be, or that is native, but it is now at a critical threshold of creating lots of dead, damaged trees. So that's important for forests. The word for the bugs is really, really cool. It is, well, the word's cool, but the concept is even more. Ovipositor, O-V-I-P-O-S-I-T-E-R. And that is this device that the female has that she punctures the wood with. So it's kind of like a saw. Well, it's more like that. This is like a saw, and one part, she goes down and bores into the wood. She has a tube, and she lays the eggs in through that, and then she contracts the sides of the saw and pulls it out. That saw tube device is the ovipositor, and it is used as inspiration for the surgical devices for going into human brain bone. Ovipositor. All right, so for statistics, the only thing I'm going to say about that is I have added a second statistic class, an undergrad one, in order to learn more about the software R program so that I can pass my graduate level stats class, and all of that together. I will be able to make some really cool graphs, and we will talk about stats when I get to making cool graphs. Ecological Economics. That continues to be a really great class. This week was on natural capital and natural capital and ecosystem services. So we are finding various ways to value what the forests give us. It's a very controversial topic. How do you put a monetary price on something that is priceless? But it does have value. One of the cool videos that we listened to, I guess, was on how bats were evaluated for a farm and the service they provide. Bats will eat 2/3 of their weight a night in insects. So the farmer had a $4 million windfall, and they evaluated the services from the bats at $750,000. That's how much pesticide the farmer did not have to put out on the crops. That's what the bats gave for free. Another one is mango swamp, where a shrimp farm wanted to come in, and they were going to cut down the mangroves and put in a shrimp farming business. So they said, oh, we're going to create this many jobs, we're going to have this much revenue, we're going to pay this much in taxes. But when they did the environmental assessment and found out how much mangrove swamp gives in cleaning water, protecting the land, and keeping the soil stabilized, those are services that they would have to pay for at some point in time, and those services provided more benefit than what the shrimp farm was going to give them. So it made sense to keep the mangrove swamp environmentally and economically. Just to show a little bit of the difficulties of the concept, say you evaluate a river. Well, we have climate change, and so now that river, it doesn't have as much water in it. Do you devalue the river? Do you liquidate your asset? So it doesn't fit as well into our economical little system. But at least we are saying that the environment does provide us services, so that's a good step forward. One of the things the environment provides is biodiversity, and that is important in terms of, like, back to our bugs and insects. If you don't have enough, you don't have a lot of biodiversity, and you have an outbreak of bugs, and they just devastate the entire ecosystem, and then you've got no services left. But there was this really cool piece from Radiolab from 2014, How to Put a Price on Nature. I want to read the quote. I believe it was from J.B. McKinnon. He's the author of The Once and Future World. He was on there, but the way that Radiolab does it, sometimes I just couldn't figure out who was saying what. Anyway, here's the quote. What other species do is like an extension of our own brains. So much imagination is out there. We do harm to our own ability to think and dream if we draw down on the pool of life. And I have already given y'all an answer for this quiz. We can go back to the insects and the little surgical devices that came from the female insect's ovipositor. Okay, the word for ecological economics is Homo ecologicus. Ecologicus. And this is where you still make decisions based on your self-interest, but you also include the ecological common good. And I found this incredibly exciting because if any of y'all have ever gotten an email from me, you know that for a year or more, the end of my little signature is this sentence. Again, no sleep. Not enough anyway. Begin to include the cost of the environment when you consider the price of products. And that's exactly what Homo ecologicus is about. I just learned that term at the end of class, and so I'm super excited to study that concept. Homo ecologicus. Okay, last subject is my independent study, and I did indeed study the concept of pristine and how it came about. I've been looking at the philosophies of the early conservationists and what they wanted when they decided to when they were advocating to create public lands and set aside spaces. Some of that included no humans in it, and often that was specifically no Native Americans. So we are reevaluating the term and seeing how that impacts how we manage a forest. One of the concepts they're coming up with now is human inhabited protected areas. Because even in wilderness, we are there. Like right now, there's a lot of snow in the Grand Canyon, but there are still people there. They are employees, they're scientists, they're visitors, and part of the Wilderness Act said that, said man, but human is a visitor, not a permanent presence. But we are. Our faces change, and who is visiting changes, but you could not go to the Grand Canyon in some part of that area and not find people. So the question then becomes, when are people in? What are they doing? And more importantly, who is making those decisions of who's there? And that is important for figuring out how to manage those areas to really address those issues. Yeah, and I asked my professor how that helps us go forward, and he said, you had to understand the process and also how important goals are. When I first came to school, one of the things I thought, we need to just be able to define what a healthy forest is in order to manage it, not so much what do I get out of it. That's one of the problems I have with the ecosystem services. It's still about what do I get, what do people get, what are you giving me, it's important because of me. It is important because of me, but it is also important because of its own lives that are living out here. And I have learned the definition of a healthy forest depends also on who, for what reasons. If you wanted to manage for birds, you would need more edges because birds like the trees and the meadow. And if you were going to do for, say, howler monkeys, which I was fortunate enough to study at one point in time in Belize, we were seeing how much land they needed, and if you have a 20-mile area, they're only going to be in the interior 10 because they do not use the outside. They need a buffer zone. So healthy for what? For whom and for what purposes? And then we talked about, that I do believe that wilderness is very critical, and we were discussing the gradation of free-for-all, nothing else matters except what we want out of it, versus sacred. My professor is from India, and he was saying in his area there's a tree that they don't cut because it provides fruit, and even in very dry times, like 5 or 7 years of drought, you can still get fruit. Okay, so my alarm went off and I just didn't quite get to finish, but I'm gonna knit these together. I was talking about sacred in India, and that I suggested that in the U.S. for so many outdoor and environmentalists, enthusiasts, that wilderness is sacred for us. So I will be pursuing that more. The word for my independent class is, it's not really a word, it's a term, NTFP, non-timber forest products. It's also sometimes non-wood forest products. And I'm going to be looking into that in terms specifically of livelihoods and food sources, and how that could possibly play into public lands and wilderness areas. So what I would love from any of you that are watching is if you could let me know what y'all value with ecosystem services. Anything that you can think of that really matters to you that the ecosystem provides to you. Okay, and real quickly, spoiler alert for soon at some point, this, can you see it? That's the species that I'm going to be studying. Pretty soon I'll be talking to you about that one. Pinyon pines. In the meantime, get outside. Ciao.